Oh god, I'm totally gonna cry. Doing research for this video essay thing, I realized two huge things. Firstly, I've watched so many animated films, like an unbelievable amount. I've always loved watching movies, but the sheer number of things that I've seen at any given point in my life, particularly during my cable years, is astounding. It makes me feel like I must have been living in some kind of pocket dimension, because I remember playing outside and playing video games and hanging out on the cul-de-sac with my friends constantly, and yet somehow I managed to see all of this. The other thing I noticed, particularly when rediscovering movies that had a long-lasting impression upon me, is how a film could mean so much to me only to get lost in the shuffle. When you've got the types of movies that become part of the cultural conversation, your Lion Kings, Toy Stories, Princess Mononokes, and if you're thinking to yourself, man, that's just a bunch of Disney stuff, that's all you watched. I will mention that my mom used to work for Disney when I was younger, and we were part of that movies by mail program that they had. I don't know, do you guys remember that? And so if Disney put out anything, I saw it. And not to discount Disney as a provider of foundational entertainment, I mean, those three movies are three of my favorite and also damaged me in ways that I'll never be able to truly recover from. I mean, Lion King gave me a fear that not only would I lose my father before I was ready, but that I'd somehow never be able to live up to either his legacy or the image of me he always had. Toy Story for reminding me that even the fact that there will always be something new to come and replace me, we're all still going to get left behind. And Princess Mononoke for reminding me that the greatest monsters any of us will ever face are ourselves. But what a bummer, right? Roll some of that weird back footage. Remember, this shit is bouncing on balloons and woo! A Troll in Central Park was one of the litany of Don Bluth animated features released by Warner Brothers. You had your Rockadoodle, your Land Before Time spots, and of course, American Tail. 94 was a huge year for animated movies. Lion King came out and just dominated, but Disney also released Pocahontas and The Return of Jafar. And I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if I didn't mention Page Master, one of the films I'd air quotes forgotten about since the first time I saw it. A Troll in Central Park was an interesting movie that kind of walked the line between having an environmental agenda, like Fern Gully, and being a straight-up fairy tale. Our main man Stanley, hero with the green thumb, is getting roughed up by the more appropriately named troll queen Njorga and her consort. Holy goodness, her consort, Lort? Whatever. They're not stoked about Stanley and his gardenous ways. So they do what any normal monarch would do, and they decide to turn him into stone. Right off the bat, we're seeing someone different being ostracized and essentially sentenced to death, and what made this even more of an affront to a young Frankie, hey, that's me, was that the thing that made him different was beautiful and unique and ultimately made the world a better place. His green thumb brought natural beauty to everything he touched, and for that he was ultimately banished. The majority of this movie is your standard kiddie fare with moments of intense darkness with the Queenie Njorga? I don't think I'm ever going to say that right. Who is pissed that Stanley isn't miserable in his banishment and makes our new buddy Gus, seen here, cry so much that his tears threaten to drown the entire gang. And when that doesn't work, she sends a tornado to destroy Central Park and kidnaps Rosie and turns Gus into a pig troll thing? Jesus. This leads to predictable, if not adorable, call to action for Stanley that ultimately leaves him, you guessed it, turned to stone. A defeat which is resolved in a Tinkerbellian way not too much long after, and while this happy ending was ultimately what I always hoped for at the tender age of under 10, what stuck with me for all of these years, even if I did kind of forget about the movie, was just doing what was right and just for the people that don't have the ability to defend themselves is a pretty clear message. Standing up to insurmountable odds, knowing that your own destruction is all but certain, is the noble hero's end that many of us see as the ultimate good. Sacrifice, martyrdom for the sake of the meek. But I think what Stanley was struck down for is the real lesson. the ideal to seek. That making things beautiful in the world, no matter how insignificant it may seem, and even if it comes from a small place, can make a bigger impact than you can ever imagine. Switching gears from the heart-swellingly sweet to the heartbreakingly realistic, we come to The Fox and the Hound. There are a few scenes that come across my mind whenever I think of how evocative good filmmaking can be. Luke snagging that green lightsaber out of the sky. Damn! The coin flip from No Country for Old Men, and I mean, this one I could just never really shake, and is Copper standing in front of Todd. Fox and the Hound may be the definition of adorable, and I remember thinking how fun it was that there were these two little dog-like creatures that looked so different but were still best friends. And even when they met girls and got jobs, they still tried to be buds, even when their own personalities and outside forces were dead set on tearing them apart. That whole movie, sitting there, I was convinced that they would always be friends because that's what the movie was telling me. And even at a young age, standard storytelling rhythms led me to believe there was going to be a happy ending. So imagine how heartbroken I was when, even after that iconic scene, even when Copper was still willing to lay his life on the line to save his best friend, that was the last time that they were together. It still makes me sad to this day to realize that the people that we are so certain we'd lay our lives down for right now, today, might be total strangers to us tomorrow. That things outside of our control, from things as simple as lines of work to political leanings to even just mindsets, can tear the most inseparable of people apart. Because that's life. That no matter how hard we hold on to things and believe that our love, our friendship, our will can conquer it all, that all it takes is for someone else to decide that it isn't, for things to be over. Woo! Went hot and cold on you guys there, so let's end on something that was just fun and didn't leave any lasting emotional scars on any of our hearts. At least I don't think. That fidget guy was kind of scary, and Radigan was really frightening, and now I think about it. Anyways, The Great Mouse Detective was my first introduction into the mythos of Sherlock Holmes. At least to my knowledge, his characterization gets shoehorned into almost every form of media, but at least Basil was the first version that I cared enough about to remember. The whole world of rodent England definitely sent me down the path towards being an amateur Anglophile. Basil and his Holmesian sidekick, Dr. David Q. Dawson, who surprisingly just got back from Afghanistan? Man, hit him with that realism, Disney. What did this little rodent see? Did he like smuggle himself in a shoe or a boot or something? Did he see combat? Holy crap. Dawson and Basil had a type of banter and back and forth that people spend years trying to emulate. Basil was just so smooth and cool and smart, and it made me really think like intelligence is a trait to really go after. That deduction and reasoning skills were things that were neat and enduringly beneficial. So the first time I was introduced to so many ideas that would ingrain themselves as tropes in filmmaking, at the very least the type of things that would be echoed in almost every version of Sherlock Holmes to make it to screens of any size. Rube Goldberg machines, the kidnap and replace with a doppelganger maneuver, sacrificing a henchman, and of course the hero is dead. But not really. This movie, as much as it instilled a thirst to never neglect my intellect, also kind of introduced me to the building blocks of a lot of movies that I would go on to see and love. The Great Mouse Detective is almost a perfect movie. It's a great interpretation of a pre-existing property, a movie that never lingers but never feels rushed, a likable, if flawed protagonist that goes through growth, and, of course, Vincent Price. Hey folks, thanks for watching. I want to give a quick shout out to not only everyone that actually watched to this point and is hearing this shout out, but Mikey from Movies with Mikey for getting me motivated to actually do a YouTube video again, and also to not quit after everything blew up the first time I tried to render. So, thanks.